Good morning. Video 2 on Dave's dodgy dossier. It's worth having a look through this booklet and seeing if you can find anywhere where it tells you what the cost or the economics are of joining the European Union. So the costs must be something that the government is sensitive about, otherwise it would have told you. So I'm going to run through the costs of the European Union today because in all things I think it was President Reagan who said it's the economy, stupid, and certainly the economy and our relationship with the European Union is essential to the debate. Now let's start with the figures that you should have, and I am quoting figures that have come from the House of Commons, so they are the most reliable that you can possibly get. The EU spends, the European Commission spend about 155 billion a year, okay? Of which the gross contribution that the UK makes to the EU is £17.8 billion, okay? You will hear the people from the Leave campaign and the Brexit campaign telling you that the EU costs us £350 million a day. It does not. They are quoting from this figure here, and as you will see, it is fundamentally wrong. So why they continue to give a wrong figure, goodness knows. At least they're now being picked up by the BBC and others. But what the UK happens is the UK gets back a rebate against its gross contribution of 17.8 billion. It gets a rebate of 4.9 billion, so its net is 12.9 billion. Spent in the UK is 4.4 billion, so the EU spends 4.4 billion in the UK. Things on social, regional policies, the agricultural policies, the fishing policies are spent in the UK, which comes down to a net 8.5 billion. So when you are looking at, and when anybody tells you that it's 350 million it costs us every day, the answer is no, 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 it's about half of that. However, the EU also spends, and I'm about the only person that's bringing this into the debate that I've seen, the EU also spends with private companies about 1.4 billion a year. So the net cost to the UK is about 7.1 billion. Fact, okay? House of Commons, fact. No debate about it. Now, what is really important is the trade that the UK has with the European Union. And the threat to our trade, because at the moment we can sell into the European Union without any tariffs. Now what happens is the UK exports to the European Union £230 billion worth every year, and the EU exports to the UK 289 million a year. Okay? Now, that means that we have a trade deficit with the European Union of $59 billion. Sorry, £59 million. Now, what we have is, we have people like the Finance Minister of Germany telling us that there is no way that we are going to be given access to the European market unless we continue to sign up to the free movement of labour, and we continue to pay a fee the same way as Norway and Switzerland does. So basically they are telling everybody that even if we leave, we're going to have to still obey to the same rules, but we're not going to have a voice at the table. As we've already discussed in the earlier video, we don't have a voice at the table, so that means nothing to us. However, he's sitting there saying that they're going to charge us in any case. Point number one is that under the EU directive, I think it's Article 27, but please don't quote me on that, under the EU directive there is a legal requirement that the EU treats its neighbours honestly and fairly. So if we've left under their own laws, they've got to treat us honestly and fairly. And everybody is talking about a 10-year period of uncertainty. Again, under the EU laws, they have to have agreed with us and negotiated the new arrangements within 2 years of us having given, or the UK having given notice to leave. However, I temper this law because under the, I think it's Article 125, I think, under the EU treaty, under one of the EU treaties, it is absolutely illegal for the European Central Bank to lend money, or for the European Union to lend money to any country. However, illegally, and this is why David Cameron thought there was bound to be treaty change, illegally the European Central Bank have set up a fund which has created 500 billion in order to deal with the bailouts of the pig countries, Portugal, Ireland, Greece and Spain. A 500 billion fund has been created illegally in Europe, so don't expect them to obey the laws when we come to leave, because they don't believe in such things. However, we are going to, let's just say that they impose upon the UK tariffs equal to the tariffs that would be put on that they're allowed to do under the World Trade Organization. Now we need to come back to the World Trade Organization, so I will put a note aid and memoir on that. If the EU were to put a tariff on us, on our 230 billion of exports, at the 3.5%, okay, it would cost us £8.1 billion a year. So we would have to pay into Europe 8.1 billion. Okay? However, we are saving 7.1 billion by not paying the membership fee. So we are going to be worse off by £1 billion. Our aid, just to put that into context, our aid budget is about 12 billion a year. But let's just think about that at the moment. We have in this country, one of the reasons that people are very concerned is we have net immigration. That's net inflows of people coming in and out of. Last year it was 330,000. Now, all those people need an infrastructure. They need housing, they need hospitals, they need schools, they need roads, they need transport. Let us take the cost of infrastructure of every person coming in, and let's guess a number at £75,000. It's probably much higher than that. What that means is that the UK is having to invest in infrastructure every year for net immigration that it can't control of 24.75 billion. So we won't have that cost, right? And it would certainly outweigh that, our net outflows, if they were to charge us under the World Trade Organization at 3.5%, and we were not going to impose any tariffs on their imports. Now let me just ask you, do you really think that the BMW, Volkswagen, Siemens, all the German companies are going to allow the EU to impose tariffs on us if we could impose tariffs on their imports coming in? Of course not. Do you think that Ireland, right, who imposes a lot of, who exports a lot to us, is going to want the EU Commission to impose tariffs on us, on the threat that we're going to impose tariffs on Irish exports? Of course not. And finally, just think about the USA. If they were to impose tariffs upon us, the argument is that it would damage the UK economy. I think the effect will be neutral, but it could damage the UK economy. The US will not permit the European Union to damage the UK economy because we are a major defence nation and they need the UK to be profitable in order that we meet our defence commitments. So the whole idea the foreign minister of the finance minister in Germany is going to be imposing tariffs is sheer and utter nonsense. There is so much power against it that we will be able to come to a free trade area with the European Union, because it makes no common sense for them not. And as I say, even in the worst circumstances, it would cost us $1 billion a year, but if we can get net immigration down to something that is sensible, then we're going to save a huge amount on infrastructure. Let us just, while we are talking about trade, talk about the World Trade Organization. We are the 5th largest economy in the world, and yet we cannot be represented at the World Trade Organization in any of the those trade negotiations. What you've got is that a thing currently being negotiated between the US and the UK is the TTIP. I won't go into that now, but if there is one reason you need to study the TTIP, and if you want to see some writings that I've done on this, you need to go to www.partisanfoundation.org, and there you will find a series of essays in which I write extensively about the TTIP. But in short, we have no seat at the World Trade Organization. We have to be represented by the EU. And if you can tell me that Bulgaria or Malta or Cyprus or all the Eastern Bloc countries have the same interests as us, where we have to find work to support a population of 64.8 million, you tell me that it's reasonable that we're not represented, then I'm sorry, I don't agree with you. Now, last point, but I need to clear the board for this. One of the things that we are being told is that there could be damage to the UK economy if we leave. Now, please note, it's could. We've been told that by the IMF, we're being told it by all the large banks, we're being told it by everybody. Could, not would. I noticed that a lot of people have now turned it into would. But the key to this is to understand money goes round an economy in a circle. Right? It flows. And if there is a reduction, we'll call this there's a technical term for it, M4. If there is a reduction in M4, what happens is you get recession. And yes, you are harder off. If you get a large increase in the money flows, then what you get is you get inflation. So what we try and do is we try and control, or the best thing to do is to try and control a balanced M4 within there. Now, it is right. If there were capital outflows, and capital outflows are the single biggest risk, if there are capital outflows, right, the economy will get smaller. Now, you can look at the difficulties, Russia has got into difficulties, financial difficulties, not just because of the sanctions that are being put up, got into difficulties because of capital outflows. Singularly, the worst thing is capital outflows. So the big risk is, are we going to see capital outflows? Now, the answer is, there is a risk, yes. If the European Union were to impose tariffs, then there could be capital outflows from this country. So hang on a moment, let's just think about that. If they were to impose tariffs, we would suffer capital outflows. That would destabilise the whole of the economic system, both in the UK and Europe, so they're not likely to do that. In fact, the UK is a reserve currency. The boss man of the Norwegian Sovereign Wealth Fund has said that they're not going to change their investment basis on the UK should it leave the EU. And in fact, if you look at the markets right now, there has been absolutely no change to the price of UK credit. So there is no warning signs at the moment that the UK credit market is thinking of taking money out and causing a recession. So this fear, I think, is a fear which is an unfounded fear. Now, it is right that if there were to be capital outflows, there would be an increase in interest rates, there would be an increase in your mortgage, and jobs would be affected. But there is, as I insist, there is no logical reason. Now, some people are pointing to the fact that sterling has weakened against has weakened against a basket of currencies. Yes, sterling has weakened against a basket of currencies, but when you look at the fact that we've got borrowings of 1.5 trillion and we're borrowing 100 billion extra every year, and that is having to be funded, that is the single biggest risk to the UK economy, not getting that under control, than it is to dealing with leaving Europe. So, George Osborne's failure to get the economy under control is a far bigger risk to capital outflows and inflows than anything that the European, us staying or leaving with the European Union has. Okay, therefore I leave it to you to make a decision on the basis of that additional information. Thank you for listening. Bye-bye.